Hi, friends. Welcome. Welcome to this. This is part two of our What College Admission Looks Like in 2024 series, and what you can do to prepare. I'm joined by some special guests today, Hillary and Carlos and Tom, whom you'll meet very shortly. What we're talking about today, we're going to talk in just a minute with Hillary and Carlos about what surprised them this year. We're going to talk about what's changed or hasn't changed when it comes to essays. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court decision to ban race-conscious admission and lots more. But before we get cracking here, I'd love for y'all to just maybe take a second to introduce yourselves. And I'm not going to make you do like one fun fact. It's just like straight up intro. Like, what do you want the folks to know about you? Hillary, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Carlos.
Awesome. Well, hi, friends. My name is Hillary. I am on the admission staff at Colorado College. It's a small liberal arts school in Colorado Springs. And I've only been doing this work for 3 years. I actually came from the classroom. I used to teach at our local public university. I've got two college age kids, so I've been in your shoes recently, walking through this with them. And I just love getting the chance to meet parents and students. So I'm really glad you're here and that we get to chat today.
Thanks. Carlos.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Vega, senior assistant director of admission at MIT. This is my third year at MIT, 12th year in college admissions. I was up in Vermont for about 10 years, where I was at a small liberal arts college, also worked on my doctorate, and then moved to Boston about 3 years ago, and it's been great. It's been great. Basically, most of my career, or pretty much all of my career, has been in higher education. I also, throughout the time, have worked in college athletics and also worked with college athletes, so a lot of different populations, but happy to be here. And I did mention I am grateful for faces because there's a lot of times when we'll do webinars and I don't get to see anyone's face, right? And that's not fun. It seems like you're talking to blank spaces, so it's fun, and you can see if people laugh at your jokes. So that is comforting.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for both of us, Carlos. And Tom. Some of you have met Tom, but Tom, tell the folks who you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Campbell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm College Essay Guys community manager, but we actually just met this week to talk about maybe a title. I do a lot of things at College Essay Guy, which I'll have to do with the community in some way. So I guess it's still pretty appropriate. So my background is in college admissions and college counseling. I spent 6 years total on the admission side of the desk at Holy Cross and Pomona College. And I also worked at Lakeside School in Seattle, Washington, an independent school, working with students and families applying to colleges. So happy to be here to share insight around that. Although the special guests really are Carlos and Hillary. I'm around all the time, so just tune into any recorded webinar for CEG or my old podcast, and I've pretty much exhausted all my talking points. So take advantage of these two in a nice way, and I'll be there in the chat to answer questions you specifically have that come up. So that'll be my main job today.
Sweet. Thanks. And I'm Ethan. I'm the college essay guy. I spend lots and lots of time thinking about how to help bring more resources to y'all. And for counselors, let's actually do a quick poll. Are you a student, parent, counselor, or someone else? And if you're someone else, let us know in the chat who that is. We're joined by our lovely moderator, Diana Alvarado. Thank you, Diana, for holding it down. If you've got tech questions, you can message her. So the format I'm going to moderate, I'm going to kind of lob some questions to Hillary and Carlos. And if y'all have more questions, throw them into the chat. Diana will grab them and put them on our behind the scenes Google Doc. And I'm going to kind of select them as we go and try and find ones that are most applicable to most folks as best I can. And looking at the poll, we've got right now about 50% counselors, like 43% parents, and 6% students, because I guess students are just not thinking about college admissions in February as much. And as far as 9th, 10th, 11th graders. This happened last week as well, where we had many more students or many more parents and counselors. Carlos, let's start with you. What surprised you this past year, this past admission cycle?
I muted myself. It's a great question. Honestly, not a lot. Not a lot has surprised me. I know that as we're seeing more and more of the Ivy League institutions are going back to requiring test scores. So that's something new. I wouldn't say surprising, but that's definitely something new in college admissions in the landscape. their applications continue to be very high, you know, and so that test, we're going to see how their applications stay, if they don't stay. But if I had to point one thing out, FAFSA troubles, right? FAFSA is affecting a lot of schools, and a lot of schools are on CSS profile too, or some are not, but like that is just a whole big old mess for a lot of different people. And so that is hopefully going to clear up soon, right? But that, you know, that for me, that was one of the biggest things that I noticed. And I know that a lot of people are talking about it and are concerned about it. I think schools are figuring it out like we always do. But very concerning. And hopefully we have a fix for it by the time the next FAFSA cycle rolls around.
Yeah, I've been chatting with Angel Perez from MacGec, and he's been
Yeah.
in a lot of colleges who are in it right now. Hillary, what about for you? What surprised you, if anything, this admission cycle?
Yeah, my whole office has been surprised by how our international applications have shifted. I think, like lots of other institutions, have seen a huge jump in the number of applications coming from Africa. I think our dean may have said something like we could fill our whole class with amazing students from Ghana, which is true. So that's been a really interesting shift to see happening. Doesn't super affect our domestic pool, but it does make our international pool a lot more competitive. And then I think that the other thing that has sort of surprised me has been, I know we're going to talk more about AI later, but seeing the impact or maybe not impact of AI, it's just been interesting to sort of watch that evolve as we think about how students are writing and how counselors and teachers also are writing. It's just been it's been an interesting component of reading this year for sure.
I mean, let's get into it, Hillary. Why wait? What thoughts on AI? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so for full disclosure, I'm on the comms team. I do a lot of the marketing at CC, and so we have played with using AI as we're writing emails to students, right? Like you're sitting there, you have writer's block. You're like, I know I need to write an essay about how students at CC love to get outside, right? So here, not an essay, an email. So here, AI, like, tell me, how should I write this email about rock climbing at CC? And so because I've kind of worked with ChatGPT that way, I feel like I have a pretty good sense for the tone and the voice that AI generated writing has. And I just haven't seen a lot of it in applications from students who are really competitive academically. Like I'm still hearing students' voices. I'm still hearing their authentic voices in the applications of students who were already competitive for admission. The places where I've been able to hear kind of an AI generated voice is with students who probably were less likely to be competitive for admission to CC anyway. And so it hasn't made a huge difference in how we're reading applications.
Do you feel like you can tell, Hillary, when you're reading it, having had some experience with it? Do you feel like there is a sense?
Oh my gosh. Yes. 100%. And that's not to say that the students who are competitive aren't using ChatGPT or another AI system to refine, right? Or to give themselves ideas about how to write their essay or to brainstorm or whatever, or to proofread. Like I would never know, and that's fine. I feel like that's a reasonable use of AI technology. But I have not been hearing that sort of AI voice when I'm reading students who are competitive for admission.
Interesting. Thanks. Carlos, what about you? What AI thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who works at an institute of technology, we love it, right? Use the tools that that are available to you. Obviously, make it your own voice, make it your own. Downside to AI, if you use AI, AI can check AI, right? So if for any reason there's a reason why we might think that someone's using AI, we can ask, hey, did AI write this? And even ChatGPT will be like, this is like 75 to 80%, you know, AI, or this is completely natural or whatnot. I mean, I know it's not perfect, but like typically, you know, there's a lot of correlation between your grades, how you perform, how you write your essays, right? If you have B's and C's and maybe your English classes maybe didn't do as well, on the SAT writing, but then you have this wonderfully, perfectly manicured essay that is just, that there are ways to check. There are just ways to check. Not something that we do often, because once again, an essay is important, and for us, we want it to tell your story, basically, right? And AI is not going to tell your story for you. No matter how hard, right? It's not going to tell your story for you. So that's what it's used for. Rarely are we checking, or is a student using AI? If you can use a tool to proofread and all of that, wonderful, right? Use whatever is available to you. Then there's the plagiarism part and all of that, but like I rarely see it, and if we have concerns, we'll use the tools available to us to check to see
Check to find out.
Right. So, but yeah, if you need help with grammar and all of those stuff, and AI is the tool that you're going to use, why not use it?
Right. And I know MIT does the writing portion a little bit different from most many colleges. Will you say a little bit about how MIT does writing differently, and what MIT, I mean, it doesn't, we don't need to turn this into like what MIT looks for, but
Right.
let's get specific, because I think it'll help students think about, as they're starting to look ahead, how different schools do have different requirements and do in some
Sure.
cases look for different things.
Yeah, so for anyone interested in MIT or just wanting to know, we don't have like a big essay. We don't have your college essay that you typically, right? We have our own application. So we have short essay supplements that we ask, and this is straight out of my info session book that I'll say, right? That we have, like any good scientist, we have a question, we ask you a question, and we want you to answer it in 225 words or less, right? Like those are the things, keep it within that. There's no time for fluff within our essays, right? The joke I always make is like, there's no time to talk about, the proverbial protractor that got you through the math, that slayed the math dragon, and now you're going to make it through. Like, there's no space for that. Unfortunately, that probably makes for a wonderful story, but you can't fit that in 225 words, right? So if you're interested in something, if you're interested in the sciences, we're going to ask you, are you interested in the sciences, right? We know you lead a busy life full of activities. Tell us something that you do for the pleasure of it, right? And you can do that in a short essay, and we can get to know you that way, or talk about what's important to you, or things that within your life, your context, all of that information, you can pretty much fit in those 225 words, and that, and they're directed at you specifically for that reason, right? Like college essays, they're great. And I also worked at institutions that I have read a lot of, tear-jerking essays. But you probably aren't going to have many tear-jerking essays in 225 words. It's just like, it's not going to happen. We're trying to figure out something specifically, and that's the wonderful part about having our own application. I know that we get a lot of people saying that it's restrictive, and I get that, and access to all of that, and keep everything centralized, but we really are looking for specific things within students, and I think that our short essay supplements can help guide students to answer those questions. So that's specifically to us, right? I don't speak for the hundreds of other institutions or thousands.
Well, what I'm hearing you say, and I want to get your take in a minute, Hillary, too, and hear any potential differences. But what I'm hearing you say, Carlos, is that if we have a spectrum of sort of like information on this side and poetry on this side, we're looking for information here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kinds of information is MIT looking for? And again, we can kind of broaden it to like, do you sense the college is looking for? But I think it's useful to kind of give some specifics of sort of case study-ish. What kind of is MIT looking for in terms of information from these writing pieces?
Well, I think the one I think of the most that I often see, or I'll go to, is, right, we are a STEM institution, but we'll ask you what you're most interested in studying, right? For example, a lot of people will say business, economics, history, and those are things that we have, and that's great. I mean, typically 75% of our applicants are computer science, and that's also great. But within that, tell us why you want to study those things, right? You'd be surprised how many times people don't give specifics about, why they want to study history specifically at MIT, right? Or they want to do business specifically at MIT, because a lot of our programs are pretty unique in the sense of, what we require of students or how the curriculum is. So specifics about, And you probably see this all the time, right? Like what professor you might want to work with or what lab you might want to work, like those things, even the small details of I want to do, an undergraduate research opportunity program within this department, that shows us that you're actually interested and you did your research about MIT, right?
Right.
And then you can do that within that application field and all of that, right? What field of study appeals to you, why that's important to you. Oftentimes, I'll read, yeah, I want to go there because you all have a really good computer science program. Or sometimes they won't mention MIT at all. They'll just say like, I like to, code and do all of that. Great. But like, why do you want to come here specifically? And
Yeah.
that, as easy as that sounds, is not something that is often answered, right? And those are things that we're reading, and we're reading a lot of applications, but that is a pretty easy read because that's one specific question I like to hone in on. Like, if you can't even tell me why you want to be there, then that pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the application.
I appreciate that. Hillary, I want to kick it to you for a minute. What are you noticing in terms of, in particular, like differences in terms of how Colorado College looks at essays? And if you feel like talking about it, have you noticed any changes over the last year or two? Because that's another theme of today.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of differences for us between how we look at essays and the way that Carlos is looking at writing at MIT. We first, like, we're just coming from a totally different place, right? We're a liberal arts college. We expect you to want to have an interdisciplinary experience. We expect you to be curious about lots of different areas. And we love it when students come in not knowing what they want to study at CC. Versus like knowing specifically what they want to study and what they want to do. We know that something like only 27%, I think, of people out in the working world are doing something that's related to their college major. And so for us, that opens up a world of opportunities, right? Where we're not really thinking so much about their academic program. What we are looking for is students who can be really reflective, who have figured out why they've become the person who they've become over the last 4 or 8 or 10 years as they're growing up. We're looking for evidence that the student is going to be engaged on our campus and that there are things that they're excited about, whether that's academic or in student life, where we can envision them plugging in. And part of that is, like Carlos was saying, really knowing why you want to go to the school that you're applying to. And we have different supplemental essay options, right? And only one of them really digs into why you want to come to CC. But across any supplement that you're being asked, if you can identify how what you care about overlaps with what the school cares about and sort of showcase that, you're going to be writing a winning essay, even if it's only 250 words or something, right? Because we are all looking for why would the student want to come here, and can we envision the fit, and can we see kind of what is going to help them contribute to our community, because we want to build a really strong and vibrant community. So that's what the writing portion of the application really gives us insight into.
Yeah, speaking of that last point, Hillary, that you're making about trying to really get at what students are going to bring to their community, that's a much more common essay prompt as of this year, given the recent ban, ban from the Supreme Court on race-conscious admission. I'd be curious to hear from you, Hillary, first. What impacts have you seen of that decision internally, like in your institution, and also just in terms of what students are writing about, how they're writing, the applications that are coming in? What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. The decision definitely we anticipated it, right? And nonetheless, it sort of blew up our office and made us start really having to get serious about thinking differently about the questions that we were asking in the supplement in order to give students space to talk about their experiences. And we hadn't really had, there's always the personal statement, right? But we hadn't really had a supplemental prompt that was tailored to that before. So that was definitely a change in our process. We've also figured out sort of where we've fallen short in writing that prompt or prompts, and not writing them in ways that really helped students to understand what we were looking for. Like where we have said, I think one of our supplemental prompts asks a question about a time when your perspective was challenged. And we've seen lots of students talking about a time when their perspective was challenged and then prove to them that they were right. When what we were really looking for was like, tell us about a time when your perspective was challenged and it caused you to change your mind or to be open to changing your mind. And so we figured out like, wow, we didn't do a very good job asking that question, and we need to rethink how that prompt looks in order to get more of the response that we're looking for. The other thing that has been really interesting is when students have kind of started digging into their lived experience, there have been a few that have really stood out. I can remember one student in particular who she was born in Jamaica, but is going to high school in the US, and came to me at a college fair and asked me very directly, can I celebrate my background at your college? And how will my background be celebrated? I'm looking for a place where I can share the food that I love, and I can share the music that I love, and where other people from other backgrounds can share those things, and I can learn from them about what is joyous and fun and exciting about their backgrounds. And I think that is a part that's sort of been skipped in this, right? I think a lot of students and counselors, and maybe on the college side too, we interpret this lived experience kind of issue as being something about like, tell me how your life has been challenging or what has been hard that you've had to overcome. But for us, it's just as much about, tell us what we can celebrate about your life that is going to enrich not just like your, close group of friends, but our whole campus by having you come here. So it's been fun to see a few students really dig into that sort of joyful side of the lived experience.
What did you say to the student? I'm curious when they
Yeah,
asked.
so I told her about, this was during like Latinx Heritage Month, I think, and so I told her about some of the celebrations that were going on where students from South and Central America were sharing some of their food, their favorite foods on campus. And then I started sending her like links to Instagram posts that were coming from the Butler Center and from the one of the Latinx groups on campus. And I probably drove her away because she ended up being admitted ED1 somewhere else, and I didn't get her. But like, I tried to give her as much information I could about how we celebrate different cultures and backgrounds at CC.
Awesome. Carlos, what are you noticing? Again, either internally or externally, in terms of the conversations that are happening behind the scenes, or what are you saying?
Sure. I mean, as an institution who there's no checkbox anymore, right? You can't tell us race or ethnicity within our checkboxes. We also use this a lot about talking about lived experience within the essays. Actually, there's a great question in the chat about, you can't specifically talk about race within, checkboxes or all of that, but, does that mean that universities see essays and bring up race and they note the quality of the response as well as race? So for us, still no, right? That's not something we're talking about, but lived experience and what your identity, what your race, what all that might mean to you and how that's important to you. I mean, we have a question within our essays that talks about that, right? People come from diverse backgrounds together to collaborate. And, how has this collaboration, what does that mean to you? What does community mean to you? What is basically, what is important to you, right? And that is something that can very well come out through these essays that students are talking about them or what's important to them, whether it is, through food or whether it is through family, whether it is through community. And all of that is something that is important to us, right? When we're looking at applications, we want to get to know the students, right? And we tell them, you can send us whatever, you don't send us 8,000 recommendation letters because we're asking for 3, and people won't normally listen to you and they'll send you 8,000 anyway, right? But like, we really to get to know the student through the essays and then the guidance counselor recommendation. And so yeah, it is tough. It is tough where a couple of years ago, that's something that within your admission process we could look at, and now it's something that you don't. But what does that mean to you as a student? What does that mean? What is your family? What is your culture? That can come out through essays. and yeah, that's something that might be talked about in that sense, right? Like, what is important to you? What does your lived experience mean to you? Overcoming adversity, if there are things that have happened to you within a school context, right? Like, how has that been challenging? How have you overcome that? Those are things that you can talk about within the essay. So like, yeah, there's no more check boxes. There's none of that we even asked for. So I couldn't even tell you if the Common App does that or not, right? But like, something that we don't take into consideration, but at the same time, like, what's important to you? And I sound like a broken record, but like that is very important to us, getting to know students, getting to know their backgrounds. Like, I chime in every info session. I always pause to let people know, right? We understand that people have different experiences. Even within the curriculum you can take, we know people don't have access to extra and co-curricular activities at their schools, or, certain curriculum in the sense of, one school might offer a full IB curriculum, a full AP curriculum. We see students come pretty much graduating with an associate's degree. They've taken that much college credit. And I tell families, like, if that's not you, if, those classes are expensive. Not everyone can afford those. Not everyone goes to schools that have all of these different offerings, right? We're looking at you within the context of what your school offers. So that is something that I always talk about, right? Like, we know everyone's lives are different, right? Some students work full-time jobs, help support their family. Those are all things that we want to know, and you can do that within the application. My biggest pet peeve is leaving things blank unless we tell you it's okay. Like, optional is optional is optional, but don't leave things blank, right? Like, we want to get to know you the most, and the best way to do that is by filling in the questions that we ask. Obviously, it's not going to cover everything in your life. That's just impossible to do. But things that are important to you, that's where we'll get out from the essays, especially in the case of, unfortunately, the Supreme Court case, that things that aren't considered within the application anymore.
Yeah, and yet it's interesting hearing you say this really resonates with what conversations I've had with other college admission officers. And yet I think there are still students out there, and I just want to point out, and parents too, a question that came in, and this is kind of a two-parter, but Sarah noted, how is your college ensuring the safety of Jewish students given the anti-Semitism that's become pervasive on many college campuses? And should Jewish students not disclose in their applications? And this is maybe something of a leading question, but are there any situations, Carlos or Hillary, that you could imagine where you wouldn't want a student to talk about their identity in terms of their cultural identity?
No, and the first part of that with campus safety and every campus is different. I know we're getting it a lot right now about, protests and all of that, and letting students do those things, but to a certain extent, we care about the safety of our students. So every campus has their problems and all of that. But when it comes to applications and talking about religion and things that are important to you, yeah, that's something we want to know, right? Don't shy away from it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's important to you, right? And for some students it is, for some students it isn't, right? But that is something that we'll still ask, right? We still ask for religion, and we still ask for all of that, because that is potentially part of a student's identity, and that's important to them.
So in sort of
Yeah,
sorry, please jump in,
oh,
please. No, go ahead.
I was going to say that I've read some really fantastic writing from Jewish students this year who were wrestling with their identity and sort of where they stood on issues that had to do with Palestine, even like before the October attack. And it's just like to be able to see a student who identifies strongly with their heritage and their religion, and also is thinking about sort of the context of that identity in the world, is a really interesting place to be. And those are the kinds of students who we're looking for, who want to be part of a conversation, right? And we have had students and faculty and staff all say that they feel unsafe and need some sort of reassurance. And our president has been really strong about saying, like, we can have conversations and we must have open conversations here. And we also need to learn how to do it in a way that is safe and where we don't tear each other down or make people feel unsafe. And so there is one office, especially on our campus, who sort of moderates those conversations. And we've had multiple opportunities for staff and faculty to sit down together and talk with someone who's trained to sort of manage difficult conversations. I mean, we've actually been having conversations like that on our campus for a long time as part of our commitment to anti-racism. So it's not super new to us. But I feel like there's definitely like a heightened sense of insecurity for a lot of students, not just for Jewish students, but for Muslim and Arab students also, who want to be able to engage and want to do it in a way that feels safe. So it's interesting to see students wrestling with that in their application. And when we can see that that's part of how they're thinking before they even get to CC, it tells us that they want to be part of those tough conversations. And we think tough conversations are important to have.
I appreciate that. We're talking a little bit about some of the things that are real present, like now in this year, and the majority of folks on, this call, parents, counselors. Well, let's say there are a good number of parents who've never been through this process before. This is their first kid. I'd love to hear from y'all, whoever's got something first. What is some of your go-to advice for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders in any year in terms of like stuff that they can do to begin preparing? And you can get as specific as you like. I think actually I would prefer the more specific or those turns of phrases that you feel like, be thinking about this or don't worry about this. And another way of framing this is like, here are some things, some things to focus on. And here are some things that you don't necessarily need to worry about, maybe as much as you might think. So let's go. I don't know, whoever's got one first. Carlos, what do you got?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that you'll hear a lot, and I'll start out with, and it's not going to be, my whole answer isn't going to be about this, but keeping your grades up, right? Keeping your grades up. And I've seen a lot of senioritis that you were so close, but then you let your grades slip, right?
And Carlos, has that ever led to rescinded applications where
Oh,
somebody
sure.
at the bottom fell out? It does.
Absolutely. Yeah. At a school that has what, 3-4% admit rate, your grades are going to be very important. We want to know that you succeed. We don't want you to take your foot off the pedal, especially that senior year, right? So that's why I started with that, right? Because it can affect you. And once again, I'm speaking for my institution. I don't speak for other institutions. Also be realistic with yourselves, right? Like, if you have C's and D's, be realistic with yourself, right? I have students that put all their eggs in one basket. Like, no, apply to many schools. I'm not telling you to apply to 20 schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling, but I know I see some smirks, right? Some might apply to 20, 30, 40 schools. That's on you. I'm not going to tell you where to apply or where not to apply, but don't apply to just one school, right? Because it's tough. And so what happens if it doesn't work out? And I know there's gap years and we could spend hours talking about like what's next if I don't get into the institution that I want to go to. There's a lot of great institutions and there's always grad school and all of that. But like, yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Another thing for me, or specifically for us, are you taking the toughest curriculum? When I said be realistic with yourself, right? If I talked about earlier, not everyone has access to the same AP and IB and all of that. That's fine, right? But if your school does, right? Or if you have multivariable calculus and you're taking Calc AB or pre-calculus, right? We want to see that you've challenged yourself within your school's curriculum. So are you taking the toughest curriculum at your school? And for a school like us, right? We want STEM. We like to see STEM. We love STEM courses, right? We'd like to see that you're taking that multivariable calculus course. I know it sounds like a lot, but your school offers it, right? You have access to it. You don't have to pay extra. You don't have to go out of your way to go to a community college. You don't have to go to a local state institution to take those courses. No, it's offered at your school. So be realistic with yourself, right? I'll repeat myself, and I repeat myself multiple times when I'm talking to families. Like, are you taking the toughest curriculum? If not, you probably should. And we can talk curriculum for days, but like, yeah, be realistic with yourself and don't put too much pressure because, you know, I know, and I completely get the process started early, you know, ninth, 10th grade. Yeah, ask us questions. Right now, we talked about this earlier, right? You still have time to change your curriculum to something else right now. Take the tougher course. If it's between AP or honors or regular for us, obviously, not obviously, but we're going to ask you for the toughest course, as I said, right? So you have time to fix that curriculum. But at the same time, right, like, if you're in sixth or seventh grade and you're asking me what your best, you know, what classes should I take? I can't tell you that, right? It completely evolves. And I get that a lot. So you'd be surprised, right? Like take your time with it. It's your process. I get it. Everyone's experiences are differently, but you know, 11th grade's going to come pretty soon, or if you want to graduate early, all of that. I know it's coming around the corner, but take your time with it, breathe, apply to multiple schools. That's what I would say.
Love it. Hillary, what about you? What's some of your favorite things to tell students and also, you know, parents and counselors who are advising or helping students through this process?
Yeah. So I'll start with ninth graders, like along the lines of what Carlos said, like be getting good grades, right? And set yourself up for success in later, more rigorous classes. Same thing with 10th grade. And I would say in 10th grade, start wondering about what you're curious about and what you love to study and what academic subjects make you really excited, so that if you're a student who wants to go like on a super STEM focus, like what Carlos is talking about, you are prepared to do that so that you're ready to take those tough classes that he's saying that you need for a place like MIT. At CC, we're probably more like the rest of the colleges in America than like MIT, where, yeah, we want you to have some rigor. We need to know that you can handle the rigorous classes at CC. But for us, that is like 7, 8 AP classes, if AP classes are available at your school, or, you know, HL/IB classes, or the IB diploma. Any of those we love. Whatever the rigor is that's available at your school, if you're taking advantage of some or most of it, and we can predict success in our rigorous curriculum from that, then you're good. So like, unless you are, you know, 100%, I have to go to a place like MIT, I don't want you to overburden yourself with classes that are going to sort of bog you down and make you unhappy. But set yourself up in 9th and 10th grade so that if you want to go that direction, you're ready and you can, but you don't have to. And then junior year, keep getting good grades, you know, keep your foot on the gas pedal, but start reflecting on who you are and how you've become who you are, so that you can write about that. And then start writing. Like this time of year is a good time to start writing and to start working on your personal statement, because that's going to take you some time to do well. And we want you to be really reflective and authentic when we read your personal statement. And then for parents, I would say make it easy for your kids to know that you're proud of them. And so whatever that looks like for you, like I want you to be equally excited about the least selective colleges on your kids list as you are about the most selective colleges on your kids list. And I don't want them to have to guess about how you're going to react when they're admitted to a school on the less selective side versus a school on the most selective side. Your enthusiasm needs to be equal no matter what. And your kids should know that from a very early age. So make it easy for them to know that they've made you proud. And then I think for counselors, I love it when counselors encourage students to start engaging with colleges virtually early, because it's such a great way for them to get to know sort of the landscape and what's available to them. And I don't think you need to be planning big trips around the country in 9th and 10th grade, but a few virtual sessions here and there just to kind of get your feet wet, I think is really great. And then sort of ramp that up junior year, right?
Hillary, I want to ask, it's this kind of a personal question, but I want to know were there some ways that you were able to do it as a parent? Because I know you just gone through this process in terms of specifically helping your kids to know that, in short, that you love them and that you were proud of them. What did you say to what did
Yeah.
you find yourself saying during that process?
It's so hard, you guys. I know that probably lots of you have students who are super perfectionists and super, high achievers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on this webinar. Um, my kids specifically, I don't know if they ever believed us, but we were always really big proponents of CU. And I didn't go to CU. My husband didn't go to CU, but that is our state flagship. And we knew that our kids would be admitted there. And so we got very rah-rah about CU very early, and to the point where my kids would sort of roll their eyes, right? So from thinking about specific school, and neither one of them ended up there. It was on their list, right? Because it had to be, but neither one of them ended up there. So from a college choice perspective, that was something that we really tried to make a big deal of early in the process. But also, like, I learned when my kids were young that the most important thing that they could hear from me was that I was proud of them. And so even silly little things, like, I don't know, my younger one is in a gap year right now in Italy. And the first time that she went to get money out of the ATM there, because I didn't know this when she left, but she had never used an ATM before she left for her gap year. I was like, I'm so proud of you for figuring out how to use an ATM. And that doesn't seem like something that we should have to tell our kids that we're proud of them for. But like, these are things that they aren't necessarily learning early on, right? And so little things like that, those little developmental milestones, I've just tried to make a big deal of, so that they know that no matter where they end up or what they do, that I'm proud of them.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. So the small things are maybe in some cases kind of big things, or at least an opportunity for it to be a thing. Somebody asked a question around, well, I want to reframe a question someone asked. Someone's asking about activities. And I want to just zoom back for folks. And if folks join late, we have a podcast series that we're in the middle of it's called What Colleges Want, and it's based on the State of College Admission Report. So here's a quick snapshot of the State of College Admission Report. And this was done by the National Association of College Admission Counselors, looking at what do colleges say is important in this process. Some of the things that you've heard Carlos just now, especially emphasizing, is this top 3 things. Look at this. High school GPA, your strength of your high school curriculum. In other words, are you challenging yourself? Look, this is the percentage of colleges and universities in the US, according to this survey that came out in fall, that are given considerable importance. I'm going to get to this in just a second. Positive character attributes. We've talked a little bit about the essay. We're not probably on this webinar going to talk about demonstrated interest. Maybe we will if somebody's really curious. And then someone else is mentioning extracurricular activities. So the question that came in the chat was, what are some good extracurricular activities for MIT? In other words, if I want to get an MIT, which extracurricular activities? And I want to reframe it because I think that there's an assumption in that I should plan my extracurricular activities based on what a particular college wants. But I want to kind of ask again, a kind of a leading question, but maybe Carlos, we'll kick this one to you. In terms of positive character attributes, I'm going to ask kind of a 2-pronged question. One, what are some of the positive character attributes that, for example, MIT is looking for, and how could extracurricular activities help to demonstrate some of those positive character attributes?
I love that you're coming to me because, yeah, I get that question all the time, right? What makes me stand out? Do you have 30,000 plus applications? What can I do to best position myself and all of that? And one of the things that I often talk about is, right, and I'm a broken record. I know I keep saying it, and I saw someone put in the chat, maybe some students don't know what a record is. Okay, well,
it's like
I'm repeating myself,
CD.
right?
It's like a CD. I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. I'm repeating myself, but like oftentimes we have our own application. We only ask for 4 extra and co-curricular activities that are important to students. And I know common application is 10, right? And so oftentimes I see jaws drop and I'm like, what? But I'm in 200, 300 different activities and I do so many things and I want to tell you every little thing that I've done. And I'm like, I'm sure you do, right? But I love that we do four. Why do I love that we do four? Because that shows us what are the most meaningful to you. And I say, if you've been in robotics, and we're a STEM school, right? And most of our applicants are doing some kind of robotics or something. If you've been in robotics in second grade, fifth grade, and you're competing and you've done it for a really long time, yeah, that's probably one of the ones you want to talk about, right? Because it's going to come out too. We ask you, why is it important to you? What have you done? It's going to come out that this is important to you. You're passionate about it, right? Like all of those different things. If you've done it for a really long time, you can put that in that activity section. If you volunteered, at a race one weekend or did something for 2 days, it's probably not going to be as impactful as something that is really important to you. And yeah, we have a section underneath what else can you tell us? And that's usually where students list all 385 other activities that they've done. And, it happens, I get it. But like, I really want to know, and I love that section. Like, it's one of my favorite sections, extra and co-curricular activity. Like, what do you do? What do you do with your time? Right? Once again, I said it earlier, if you leave it blank, I might assume you're TikToking or playing PlayStation or doing all of that, socializing all day, right? In the same light, I talked about this too. Students work full-time jobs. They help support their family. Like these are things that they think that we don't want to know, or it's not impressive for a school like MIT, right? But if I see that you're working a full-time job, or I see that you're taking care of your brothers, or you're doing all of this, helping support the family, single parent household, and all of that, and still doing well in your classes and still academically you're doing great, like this, it shows a lot to me, right? This is really important to me, that this is your experience, but you're still able to overcome all this. You're still able to manage your time. You're still able to, show academic success. Those are students that we're also looking at, right? And so yes, activities, they come in different shapes, sizes, forms, all of those different things that you do. They're very important to us. But that full-time job might be just as impressive as I built, a model rocket that, shot up into the sky and made it to the moon, right? Like we've seen crazy things, crazy good things, right? But like everyone's experience is different. I always want to emphasize that. And that is a way for you to really showcase what's important to you. If you're big into community service, I see that combination a lot too, right? Like community service, President's Award, and all of that. There's a lot of, I founded my own nonprofit. Like that's a different conversation for, like, we see that a lot, great. If that's important to you, why is that important to you? What have you done? We often see these passion projects that, the website might not have been updated for whatever you've done in 2 or 3 years. Is it really that important to you? Or are you just putting that in your application because you think it's going to impress us, right? Like, those are the kind of things, like if something's important to you, if something that you do, you're passionate about it, it's pretty much going to show in the way that you talk about it and how you list it. And oftentimes you might talk about it within your essays as well. But yeah, like I said, I'm huge fan of what you do outside of the classroom. If you have access and, if you are able to do these things, I want to know. And it could be a whole session on, things that I've seen. I'm not going to talk about like specifically what we're looking, because everyone's different. Everything that people do are different. And I couldn't pinpoint you one thing that I'm like, oh man, that student's definitely going to get in because they do this one specific thing. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, do you have something, Hillary, or can I ask a different question about
I would just
standardization?
say I really liked your question about like how can you see positive personal qualities through the different activities. And I was just going to say that like whatever is on your activity list, I just want you to love what you're doing. I want you to spend time doing things that you enjoy doing. And then if there are personal qualities associated with those that you can pull out, and there's a way to showcase that in your writing somewhere, then share that with me. And it might be different depending on what you're doing, right? Like you could be working the same fast food job and the quality that comes out is that you're super reliable and that people can count on you, or it could be that you're really personable and easy to get along with, and that you lift up the people who you work with every day when you come to work by saying nice things to them and being easy and fun to get along with. So like there are different personal qualities that can come out from any of those activities, but it's up to you to sort of help us frame that or give us the context to sort of showcase those personal qualities.
We're gonna get all the hits in this webinar today. We're gonna talk standardized tests for a minute. So I'm curious, Hillary, Colorado College is test optional. What does a standardized test score mean in the application for you reading it? And many students will wonder, can I really apply and without a test score and still have a chance? Or is it low key actually not optional? Like as whatever you feel like you can say about that. And then I'd love to hear you, Carlos, talk about MIT's stance on tests. So Hillary, yeah, let's start with you. What does a standardized test score mean? And is it truly test optional? Is that for real?
Yeah. Okay. So the test score for us augments or rounds out your academic rating. So when we look at the classes that you've taken on your transcript and the grades that you've gotten, we recalculate a GPA that just includes classes from your 5 core academic areas. So math, science, social studies, English, and world language, right? And then we account for rigor and all of that in there. And then in order to create your full academic rating, if you have submitted a test score, and this is sort of the key to CC's policy, and if that test score is going to help you be admitted to CC, then we'll include it in your academic rating. If it's going to hurt your chances of being admitted to CC, we will pull it out and mark you as test optional. So that's
Wow.
called a no harm testing policy. Yeah, this is the first year we've done it. We're just piloting it. I know Denison and I think TCU also does a no harm testing policy. I'm sure there are a few others out there. But what it has done for us is make it less stressful for students to decide whether or not to submit test scores. And there's an element of trust in that, right? Like you have to believe that we really can unsee a test score, and we really can unsee a test score and actually have been able to since we became test optional, just because of the way that we process applications. But you should really feel confident when you're applying to a place like CC. And I think most other institutions that are test optional, that we are in fact test optional and that you're not going to get docked if you don't submit a score. But for CC specifically, we would encourage you to submit a score so that if you're coming from a school where your test score is above the 75th percentile of the school, but maybe is on the lower end of our mid 50th percentile, it gives us the chance to say, wow, like that's not the best score that we've seen this year, but that's a fantastic score for that school. And so we want to make sure that that score is seen in the context of that student's experience. So we are really test optional. The one thing that I would say about testing, and I think this goes for most schools that are test optional, is that the test score is part of the overall academic portion of your application, right? So your great testing is not going to make up for having nothing going on outside of school. And by the same sort of logic, your poor test score that you decide not to submit is not going to necessarily be made up for by being president of your student body. It's going to be made up for by having really strong grades in a really strong curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Carlos, talk a little bit about test scores and MIT. What's the perspective?
Yeah. Well, we did suspend our testing policy during COVID, and probably were one of the first to bring it back to require test scores. I know it's a very unpopular thing that for many, I think often we get asked, why do you even use the test scores? What is it important for? And there's many sides to this, right? But I think specifically for us, that math score is really important. I'm not saying the verbal's not, right? But that math score is really important because, it's not easy. Like I say it out loud. I always say this, right? It's not easy. It's not an easy institution. It's very rigorous, right? Like not many institutions where you have to take multivariable calculus in order to graduate, right? Regardless of what your major is. So multivariable calculus, physics, all of these courses that a lot of our students take anyway, right? But we want students to have the math base. We want them to come in and be successful, and we want them to, do well here at MIT, right? And we know these classes are tough, and not a lot of places that ask those. You mean you could be a humanities major, you could be a creative writing major at MIT, but you're still taking multivariable calculus, you're still taking chem, bio, and all of those courses that, we're notoriously known for. And so that is something that we're focusing a lot on, is that math score within the SAT or ACT. The verbal we'll look at, but typically put more importance into that. And then, as I said before, like any good scientist, we do our research. We've noticed that students, the correlation between like Calc BC, how you do in Calc BC, or how you do on the Calc BC AP exam, and how you do while you're at MIT. Typically, students who do better on those exams, or students who have done well on the SAT math, traditionally do better while they're on campus, because pretty much every course you're going to take is going to have that heavy math base, no matter what it is, even some within humanities. Do have to take 8 humanities courses to graduate, and I often tell students, if you don't like to write an essay, if you don't like to read and write and do all of that, MIT might not be the best place for you, because you're not going to get away from that, right? But traditionally, a lot of those courses will also have some kind of STEM and influence. There's a lot of wonderful majors that we offer, but that's typically why we ask for that test scores. And I know it depends. There's a lot of different situations for everything, right? And I've gotten some questions, and I see some questions in the chat about rigor, or like, what if this happened? There's exceptions to everything. One of the things and it's directly related to test scores, but it's not necessarily your question, that I always get asked, 2 things. Which one do you prefer? We don't care. SAT, ACT, doesn't matter. But the second thing is about selective, like, yes, we super score, but my biggest piece of advice, and I know there's counselors on this call, and I often get challenged, with this question. My biggest piece of advice is submit as many as you want, because we don't really care what your low score is, because we are super scoring. If anything, right? Let's say you got a 7 or a 680 math section your junior year, and you brought it up to 750, right? We're going to notice that jump in your score, that you've done better, that you've progressively gotten better. So don't worry about selectively, like, which test should I submit and all of that, because we really, honestly, and this is from my mouth, you can quote me, like, we look at your highest scores, right? Super scoring is real. I can't speak for every institution. I often find myself saying that because I know everyone does it differently, but we will look at those highest scores. And then AP scores, which is related. It's not the same thing, but if you, we want you to submit those. We want you to submit those, because typically around this time, I might reach out and say, hey, you didn't submit your score, and you told us you took the exam. What is it? Don't be surprised if you get that. And then we'll get well, the score doesn't reflect my, my true ability. And we get that, there's reasons for everything. But just go ahead and save us the time and send us your scores, because that's what we're suggesting that you do.
We're almost at time, and I wanted to a couple folks have asked, even in the questions before, about what happens if a student's gone through a health crisis. And I want to broaden this question to mental health challenges, and I want to ask it in this particular way. Are there ways that students, I imagine that there are ways that students can write. So, okay, if we take that the job of the college admission officer is to assess, is this student going to be a good fit at our school? Are they going to fit in with our culture, our community? Are they going to be able to thrive? What are some ways that students can write about health challenges? And let's speak about physical health, but also mental health challenges that help give the reader information. So what are some tips that you could give in that regard? Maybe Hillary, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Gosh, I think it's different for every student. So I'll get a tiny bit personal here. So my younger daughter has a chronic pain condition that made high school challenging for her, but she didn't want her whole application to be about her chronic pain condition. And so she chatted with her school counselor before she finished her application. And her counselor said, I'd be happy to contextualize that for you in my counselor evaluation. So that then Callie, my daughter, was free to write what she wanted to write about, which was sort of the rest of her big, bright personality, and be able to bring that into her application. So I think that's one way that you can handle it. And I've also seen plenty of students who do write about a challenge that they've had either in their personal statement or in the additional information section. And I think that that can work really well also. It just really depends on what you want to showcase about yourself. And if you feel like you're sort of, I think I heard the director of admission from Barnard talk about it this way: when you are a phoenix rising from the ashes and you have the ability to reflect on the experience that you've had, that challenge that you've overcome, then you're in a good place to write about it and to share that experience in your college application. When you're still in the ashes and you're still sort of struggling with it, you might not be in a great place to talk through that. And so it might be a better place for your counselor to talk about it. We do consider that when we see a grade drop that is at the same time as a challenge that you've experienced, and we think about your grades in that context for sure. And we admit students all the time who have a grade drop during a challenge when we've had some sort of explanation or context for that challenge.
I want to change the question slightly for you, Carlos, and ask, what do you say to a student who says or thinks maybe I shouldn't write about my mental health challenges?
Well, I think my advice is write about it, right? And I think one of the wonderful things about, again, having our own application, every single section that we have outside, we talk about our short essay prompts, and that's great, and that's time to talk about struggles and things that, might be important to you. But every single section, for example, your grading section, we ask you general comments about grading system or any disturbances or things like that is your chance to talk about that, because we have it right in front of us. What happened? If you had a tough, pandemic year, now it's the first years, right? So if you had a tough first year, you can tell us what happened in all of that. And we do actually look at all of those sections, right? We read every single part of your application. So if something happened within maybe mental health or an injury or all of that, and you might have seen a dip in grades, we're always going to look for that. If I see a dip in grades, that's the first place I'm looking for. If there's no explanation, once again, we're human, right? We're going to assume that you just had a bad year. You can tell us about things that have happened, right? And some seem like excuses and some actually really did happen. Like, I often say that for like, if you get in trouble, right? It's not the end of the world. You can talk about if you get suspended, but like make it meaningful. Is it, are you sorry? That's the main thing I'm looking for, right? Are you sorry what you did? What did you learn from it? If it's something along the lines, yeah, I got in a fight and I'm glad I did, like that's not going to help you, right? Same thing for grades. If something happened to you, if it's a challenge, if it's anything, tell us about that, because that we're going to be looking for those things, especially if you see a dip. And everyone, like I said, is unique. Everyone has things that happens to them. I see that when I took and even for test scores, when I took the SAT, I didn't know I had COVID. Right? And like my brain was foggy. Like I see that, and we take that into consideration. We're not heartless, right? At the end of the day, we're humans too. I said it twice now. We're humans too, and we're reading these applications, and we want to know what happens in, within your life. So we have disruption sections, all of these things that you can talk about within that application, and that's usually my go-to if I see anything that, I could see students that do great inside and outside of the classroom, but I had that one year that was tough. I know it's tough to talk about sometimes. Like, I think I saw somewhere in the chat that talks about like students don't want to talk about trauma and all of that. They don't want to share their experiences. And, that I respect that, right? Not everyone has to. If you don't want to talk about, if you don't want to share something, then don't do it, right? If it's going to be painful for you, then don't do it. But typically my advice is the more information we have about your life, the better, because then we can help formulate, why something may have happened or what happened within your life. So, we have those sections for a reason. Use them if they're actually pertinent to you. don't be like, I didn't learn the curriculum very, we could talk about excuses versus what it actually is for a really long time. But like, if something really did happen, tell us about it. I think is the short answer to that long-winded answer.
That's all right. Well, as we close here, I'm gonna offer kind of two options for the prompt, and maybe Hillary, I'll let you go first, and then Carlos. What's something that you what's something that you hope folks will keep in mind as they go through this process, or what's one resource that you feel like could be useful for folks as they're going through this process?
Yeah. Well, you are the best resource, so they don't need any more any more talk about that. But I just hope that people will keep in mind, and this is something that you'll hear our director at CC say pretty regularly. We're trying to get to yes. We want to get to yes for as many students as we can. And so, like right now, at this point in the cycle, like I am digging through the files of students who I really want to be able to admit to CC, and I'm emailing their counselors asking for mid-year grades so that I have more to advocate for them on, or asking questions. If I can't find the answers in their file, I'm emailing their counselors asking questions about the student to try to help me advocate as best I can for students. Um, and I just want you to know that like you have someone on this side of the desk who's rooting for you, and that we're trying as much as we can to get to yes for as many students as we can.
I love that. I love that frame. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carlos, thoughts?
Yes. And so one of the questions that we had that I don't think we specifically got to, but I'm going to say within this section was about, how can you help your students advocate and support as parents and counselors? Counselors, you're awesome. We get a lot of information from you. Your recommendation letters are amazing. This is a very unpopular opinion, maybe, but like parents, let them do their jobs, right? Like, oftentimes I will talk to counselors like, well, a parent told me that, they should call you. And I know that this is probably not something I should do, but it's at a request for a parent, like, let your students take charge of their college experience, right? There's no we in college admissions. We are not going to college. We are not taking those classes. We are not going to study engineering, right? Your students are, right? And so that's one of the things that once again, very unpopular, but I want to stress when your student has a question about, they can email and call admission offices. I know it might be nerve-wracking, but not basing your admission decision based off of that call, right? But also, if they're interested in something, let them do it, right? Let them write the emails. There's no we in college admission. So that's something that I always like to share. Even, back in my college fair days, when I would do college fairs and parents would ask all of the questions, and sometimes I'd turn to the students like, what do you want to study? Like, what do you want to do? Right? I haven't heard from you yet. Right? What's important to you? So sometimes I know it's hard, and you want your student to have the best experience and the best place and chance to get into the institution that they're really passionate and love. But also, right, they're the ones they're the ones who are gonna be on that college campus the following year. So, and counselors, yes, y'all are wonderful. We love your letters and keep doing what you're doing. That's where I'll go with that.
I love that. I'm grateful. Yeah, for retweet. You're getting claps. Y'all are both getting claps in the chat for what you're sharing here. Yeah, I want to say thanks. Thanks to you both. I know this is a busy time of year because decisions are coming out soon and stuff. So I know that you're really busy. So I'm just really, really present to gratitude for you both and for your work. And I want folks who are listening. I mean, this is maybe obvious, but I want to make it even more explicit. Like, look, these are like it's not like some big like machine that you're submitting your application to. It's like people with hearts and kids and just like these are real humans. And so part of what I hope that these sessions can do is to sort of let you know that it's just another human on the other side of the the desk, as it were, as you're submitting these, who's rooting for you. I love that you said that, Hillary. Who cares? Who's trying to get to yes? So thanks again, and thanks y'all for tuning in. And we'll see y'all again soon. Be well. Thanks again.
Thank you.